Welcome. Good to see some faces pop in here that look familiar. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive People Club in Clubhouse. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I guess it didn't show up there. I thought I had pinned the link. Let me do that again. Okay, I've got the link now. Just micromanaging here. So I found this article, 8 Ways Highly Sensitive People Make the World a Better Place. And I thought this would be a great Clubhouse conversation. I know in the last year, so many people have come into these rooms and these conversations thinking their sensitivity is a hindrance or an overwhelming challenge or not seeing it as an asset. So I really wanted to talk about the different ways that highly sensitive people experience and view the world and how that can be helpful to other people, our environments, and the systems that we participate in, and how leaning into our superpowers can really help us see the gifts and the values of being a highly sensitive person. So this is the article that I linked on the top. If you pull to refresh, you should see the article. But I just wanted to kick off the conversation with anyone who wants to come to stage and talk about the benefits of being a highly sensitive person and those experiences in your life that you feel by being a person and deeply sensing through your senses and processing information that has created a benefit for not only your experience, but for the experience of other people around you. And just share what that experience looks like for you. Because again, as HSPs, we all have this trait in common, but we all come to this conversation with our own unique experience and perspective. So I would love to just hear from anyone willing to share what that looks like for you. And yeah, anything you would like to share on the topic. I'll go ahead and mute myself and pass the mic off to Kasara. Good to see you.
Good morning, Julie, and everyone in the room. First of all, thank you for hosting. I love this highly sensitive people club. I think it was one of my first clubs I joined on Clubhouse. So again, I'm a huge fan. And I do think it brings a lot of benefit as far as education and support to the community, of course. As far as like how I believe being an HSP has made the world a better place. Number one, I think just being in tune with others has allowed me to not only come from a more compassionate and empathetic position when communicating with people. I think it allows me to kind of like move through the world with more grace. Um, because you do feel what other people are going through a lot more acutely, I think. Now, does that mean that my life is a little bit more maybe affected than maybe someone who isn't as sensitive as I am? I think so because, I process things quite deeply, and in the processing of um, just constant processing of things, I do need a lot of like downtime, and finding people who understand that has been the key to everything, the key to success. And as far as me, has been finding people who recognize that the benefits of being highly sensitive by far outweigh the maybe um, drawbacks that they might see, which means I do need a lot more space and time in between interactions. Another way that uh, having this trait has helped me build um, communities is just being able to, I think, just fluidly navigate a little bit better. Again, it's been difficult to understand that not everybody, is going to see things from point of view. When I say understand, it sometimes feels like bad when people can't like give you the same in return. And I want to say that because I think that's something that a lot of us don't talk about, like how bad it can feel when we're not seeing reciprocity, especially in the areas of compassion or empathy. But all the more so to surround yourselves with people who possess the trait because I think they tend to understand a little bit better. But I'm going to stop here and pause because I know that, is it Joy? Is that how you say your name?
Yes, Joy.
Joy. Joy's on the
Joy.
stage. Yeah. I wanted to go also like give room for others to share, but I might return with some more thoughts. Thanks, Julie.
Uh, go.
Go ahead, Joy.
Didn't know we were going to launch right in. I was waiting to hear those 8 things in the article, but I'm sure you will be sharing those. I think the thing that is the key for me of what HSPs bring to the world is that what are we here for if not to be connected to each other, to be aware of ourselves, self-awareness, awareness of what's going on. I think that it's a being human is very difficult, but if we don't have sensitivity to ourselves and to each other, what's the point? So I think that what HSPs bring is actually the crux of being human, which is to be aware. We are here. We are on the evolutionary scale. We have self-awareness. We have consciousness, and I'm not saying animals are not conscious and plants are conscious, not conscious. I think there is. They are conscious, but we have this ability to think and feel and to direct our actions and our expressions based on our consciousness. And I really think that that's what's going on in the world right now as we are showing so much of the unconscious behavior, reactive behavior that is not sensitive, and that we bring something really important in that arena of sensitivity that is absolutely necessary to make the world a better place. And I think in some ways those who have that sensitivity, while I know I was in the background and because I didn't feel like I fit in uh, for most of my life, for much of my life anyway. And as I've gotten older and more confident, and then since I've discovered HSP is like a real thing, it's not just me, that have been able to be bolder and stronger in my convictions of what it is that I have to share and what it is that I have to give to the world. And I think that it's our time for sensitivity to come to the forefront and be leaders in the world. And that's what I have to say for now. This is Joy, and I'm complete.
Thank you so much, Joy. And yes, we kind of jumped into things. I kind of wanted to hear what people had to share versus giving the list straight up. But I wanted to mention that you hit on one of the points on the article called sense of empathy and compassion. And I think this is the thing that HSPs recognize right away, clearly, because we experience the opposite from our environment, from other people, in our systems, the way that our cultural society parameters are set up is not really based on humanness. It's, these old systems that were put in place a long time ago that really support white supremacy, that support capitalism. And these aren't things that support all of humanity. And so I think to turn the corner, to make the world better, we need to enlist highly sensitive people as those forefront leaders because they have the ability to deeply process through their senses and through that experience what it might feel like for the other individual to have an experience that we may not have personally, but we can understand it from our level of depth of processing. I'll just read a little bit here what it says in the article. It says, because HSPs are more keenly aware of emotions, they may be better able to sense what others are feeling and typically have more empathy, compassion, and genuine concern for others as a result. So imagine if all the managers or the bosses or the caregivers had an HSP running an organization or an office or raising children, being influential in that way, how the world could be a better place. And it also goes on to say they are typically more aware of nonverbal cues and can easily read others, picking up on subtle emotions that most people might miss. Many HSPs report experiencing another person's emotions as if they were their own. So, again, those mirror neurons in our brain are more activated as a highly sensitive person, which gives us the ability to really sit with the energy of others and recognize what that other person might be needing in that moment, even sometimes before that individual recognizes it within themselves. So if we had, again, leadership around that, that would be a huge difference in our human experience. Another thing that was hit on, let's see, creativity and innovation. This is another one listed in the article. And this one's really important to me as a very creative person. And I know in discussions we've had in these rooms, we've talked about that being a highly sensitive person means you really have to be a creative, resourceful person because we need to approach life differently. Like Kasara mentioned, we need much more space to rest and relax and recharge our batteries because of that ability to deeply process everything in our environment and hold on to that information longer. We're going to be more overstimulated, overwhelmed by that information if we're not taking the time to give ourselves more rest and more space between transitions. So, spending more time at home and then also spacing out those different external experiences, whether it's socializing or working outside of the home, so that you have time to process those experiences instead of running from thing to thing. And I love what it says about creativity and innovation. It says highly sensitive people may be more stimulated by external stimuli. So when they turn their focus inward, their energy can be channeled creatively. Many HSPs are visionaries and inventors. They have vivid imaginations with colorful imagery and rich sensory details. Highly sensitive people are more likely to be right-brained dominant, meaning their thinking is less linear, which can make them more creative, intuitive, and curious. They may process information, experiences, and situations in a deeper, fuller way, making them more open to possibility and better able to connect the dots and find the missing pieces. This is something I feel really strongly about because before I even knew I was a highly sensitive person, Joy kind of tapped into that level of self awareness that we possess as highly sensitive people. When you experience the world this way, just like I mentioned, deeply processing information, experiences, situations, we have a more intense, fuller perspective of these things that are coming into our experience. And as you kind of accumulate those data points and connect the dots, you start to see patterns, you start to be a witness to all this array of information that we collect and process, which then does give us the innovation to come up with new ideas. Visionary inventor. I've called myself a visionary way before I knew I was a highly sensitive person. I always saw myself as someone who could creatively look at a situation and have a vision and see a future outcome that I was reaching for. and not always the person to follow through on everything, but that is what creates a visionary, is the ability to push that vision into the future and get others to help support you in creating that vision. This is also aligned with my vision of letting the world know about highly sensitive people, educating about the trait, advocating for the trait, seeing the world as something that can change. Systems can change. I think a lot of them have to be torn down before we can be innovative and create a different experience in these systems. And that will take a long time, but it does, you know, one person can make a difference. And the more that we group together as HSPs, I think we'll have the tools and the resources to make these changes in a more ambitious way. So I just wanted to share those 2 points. If anyone in the audience has a question about what I shared, or really resonates with what I shared, or you just want to share your experience and tap into the conversation, please go ahead and raise your hand. Oh my gosh. I see that Clubhouse has done an update, so I'll have to play around with the little buttons on the bottom. Always changing, always evolving, noticing all those details and processing. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming on stage. What would you like to share?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Julie, for the space, and good to see everybody. I am basically thinking the whole time of this conversation, and you guys touched on it. What a difference self-acceptance and health as an HSP makes. One thing that I stumbled on maybe like a year or so now was the Enneagram, and it's like a personality test, and then you find out you figure out what number you are, and on and on. And as it gives the description, one thing I really connected with was each description just wasn't, oh, this is what you are. It had unhealthy levels. Like, I think it was, I haven't looked at it in a long time, but like maybe 6 or 8 levels, where like the bottom half were like the unhealthies and then the top were the healthies. And it described what those look like. And what I was shocked by is the description wasn't what I had been told what is healthy. And I can't, perhaps I'm projecting, but I think, that's a common theme for in my life, was feeling, again, alone, and like, is it just me? Not, kind of a square peg in a round hole type of feeling. And just realizing that it's not just the personality, but the personality also can affect how that healthfulness comes out. So I feel like HSPs can be huge in making the world a better place. I mean, I think that they bring so much, but they can also be so, at least again, I'm just speaking for myself, can be their own biggest problem, their own biggest obstacle, like their own, can be very like unconsciously destructive, And so I'm just so happy that this club exists, because, again, this has been such a huge way for me to bring this part of myself into like self-acceptance, into seeing it's not just me, feeling that sense of community, and it's all just very nourishing. Another thing that I thought of was, and I haven't read the book, but just the title, those books where just the title alone gives you that little light bulb above your head. I was listening to a podcast forever ago, and someone mentioned dandelion children versus orchid children, where dandelion children, no matter where they're at, whether they're in the garden bed or a crack in the sidewalk, they're going to be okay. What they receive as an input, they're going to be able to basically work with it and make a similar output. And if anybody's an herb person or a flower person, dandelions are awesome. They do a lot, right? But then there's the orchid children, where if they're in the right environment and they're given the tools or the experience where they're able to love themselves and thrive, they are so beautiful. They bring beauty, something that you don't see every day, a different view of how things could be. But if they don't get nurtured, then they're not going to survive that well. So I kind of identify with the orchid, with the orchid, in that I think, and perhaps maybe a lot of the highly sensitive people might also, think of themselves that way. And so um, I just feel like if you want to be of service, and maybe you're struggling, and I should just put this in the I, not you, but if I want to be of service and I'm struggling, the thing that I'm just learning is to look to myself, first, because the gifts will more naturally be given the idea of, oh, I know where I need to fit in. Oh, I know where I can be of service, or where I can be useful, versus when I'm not healthy, I feel like I'm in an underwater, like being tumbled around in a big wave under the ocean, and I'm not going to be any use to myself. And, I'll be of use to other people, but not anything conscious, not anything that would be maybe even sustainable. Thank you, Julie, again for inviting me up to the stage. I hope that is making sense. Wholeness, everybody.
Yes, it makes total sense. And this is definitely a conversation in the HSP arena, as far as kind of using that analogy to compare ourselves to an orchid versus a dandelion. And what's interesting is I've been in these conversations where, like you mentioned, the orchid does require a certain environment and a lot of particular care to thrive. And I think for the people who are just learning that they're an HSP, this is a great model and a great way to look at our trait. But I'm going to give a little spin on that, because I also find that we can kind of connect HSPs to the dandelion. And that would be perhaps those HSPs that are a little further on their HSP journey. So maybe they didn't just learn about the trait, but they're a little further in on that level of self-care. They're making changes to their lifestyles so that they are getting the support that they need, whether it's a calm environment, a calm workspace. Um, Environment is really big for us. So when we are a little bit further on our journey, I almost feel like I'm that dandelion that can actually survive and thrive in a way that, when put into an environment that isn't exactly favorable for HSPs, because we have had to practice being uncomfortable over and over again, we do start to build skills and adaptability and resilience in being the dandelion. So I've heard also people in that conversation kind of spinning those conversations around an orchid and a dandelion. I know both Elaine Aaron and Elaine Friend have talked about those scenarios, and I can't remember where I heard the spin of maybe we're even more like a dandelion than we think, but that has definitely come in conversations in this room. So I think it's something to think about along your journey, that as we start to adapt these restful practices, these calming nervous system practices, that we start to widen our bandwidth, which gives us the ability to be in those harsh environments, in a more grounded way. And so I think as we develop those skills and the lifestyle changes that we get really creative about, it does allow us to be that dandelion. So I just wanted to share that. And if anyone has any perspective on that, I know this is something that is brought up a lot in the HSP arena. So if you've not heard that before, or if you resonate with being the orchid over the dandelion or the dandelion over the orchid, I would love to hear from you.
Julie,
This
oh, I'm sorry, Joy. I just wanted to say a really quick comment. If um, not the dandelion, I love what you said, by the way. I could just talk about this all day. I feel more, perhaps, rather than changing to be a dandelion, perhaps we're making a little greenhouse bubble around ourselves, because we're still needing that special environment, but we're creating it around ourselves so that no matter what environment, we're able to kind of be our own gardener. Okay, that's
I
it.
love that. I think that's beautiful. I'll let Joy share.
well, that yeah, I like that because I'm looking at an orchid that I have that the only one I've ever had that the flowers died, and I nurtured it for a year before it bloomed again, and now it's blooming so gorgeously. And I was about to say, but I think there's the dandelion-ness of my scrappiness that kept me going through all of this stuff of my challenges of my life. And I do want to get back to the creativity, but I see two more people have come up, and I'm assuming they're inspired by this discussion of the dandelions and the orchids. So I'm going to let them speak, and then I can speak about creativity in a minute.
Thank you, Joy. I'll go ahead and pass the mic to Paul. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks very much. Great conversation. Good to be here. I'm not going to be speaking about dandelions and orchids, though. I'm literally just on my way out, so I just wanted to just have a short share before I was leaving. Yeah, I identify as being high sensitive, and so obviously I'm a man, which a lot of men see sensitivity as a weakness. First of all, that's the first thing to say. I don't see it as a weakness, but a lot of men do. And the second thing is that I spent a lot of my life working in education and also working in around professional sports people, in particular golfers. And there was a lot of young men there. And what I saw was out of those young men, there were at least maybe 20% of them, I would say, maybe 20, maybe 30% of them who were high sensitive and who were not able to connect with, quote unquote, the program. They weren't able to connect with the way that things were being delivered. And I saw a lot of the coaches at that time were very, very frustrated with them. Why can't you just do this? And, why can't you just follow these instructions? And I actually started saying to the coaches, well, the reason they can't follow the instructions is because the way that they're being delivered is too hard for them to understand. And I said, the reason I know that is I can't understand what you're trying to ask them to do either. And I've been around this coaching for 20 years. And I could understand what they were trying to say. But what I meant was if I was a child in that environment, my nervous system would have been so triggered by the method of delivery that I wouldn't have been able to have heard what they were saying. And because I wasn't able to hear it, I certainly wouldn't be able to deliver it. And therefore, my behavior and my responses would show up as, oh, this kid's not interested. This kid's not following the advice we're giving. But that's nothing to do with it. It's because of the nervous system is not in alignment. And highly sensitive people, I know when I'm in a safe environment. I know when I'm in an environment where I can share my doubts, my concerns, my questions without being shamed, without being told off, you know, and without, you know, kind of feeling like I'm doing something wrong by questioning something. And something that I remember reading about highly sensitive people a long time ago is this, and I'll leave it on this. In supportive environments, highly sensitive people thrive. They absolutely thrive. But conversely, in, you know, environments which aren't conducive to that, they absolutely die. They completely underachieve. And, you know, I'm kind of not going to go into my childhood or anything like that, but just for highly sensitive people who have difficult childhoods, just looking at the impact of that on a system which is highly sensitive, and how if one is brought up in a family environment which recognizes sensitivity and, you know, nurtures that and sees the gifts in that and supports that, versus an environment that shames that, makes it wrong, and kind of keeps telling you, you know, you're too sensitive, you know, you're too sensitive, then what a difference that would make. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to pass there, and I'm going to have to leave shortly, but I just really wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate your contribution. And I just wanted to note that Elaine Aaron calls what you described differential susceptibility, which means exactly what you said. Highly sensitive children or people are going to thrive and actually benefit more than a non highly sensitive person in those environments that are supportive, that are caring and nurturing, not harsh and intense. And if you're an HSP that grew up in an environment or are in an environment even as an adult that is intense, harsh, and really goes against all of our senses in a way, and doesn't take the nervous system into regard, then that is actually 10 times worse for us as highly sensitive person compared to the non highly sensitive person. And those are all things that again, we may not be able to control how we were raised and what that experience was, but as adults, we can definitely modify those circumstances and experiences and environments that allow us to feel safe and supported and nurtured. So then we can be the best that we are. So I think, again, you just brought up a really great point. And Elaine Aaron talks a lot about this in her book, The Highly Sensitive Person. And that's another reason why, as someone with a strong vision and purpose and determination to let the world know about this trait, I want to support and serve those kids that have parents that are not highly sensitive and have no awareness of the trait, and give them a running start and educate the parents, the administrators, the teachers, the care providers, so that kids have this awareness at such a young age and can better cope with the environments that they're handed, or get better environments to support their trait. And that's a lot of the advocacy work that I want to do in school systems. And it's really exciting to give someone the opportunity to be aware of this trait at such a young age. I didn't learn about this trait until I was 43. So I can only imagine what that must be like for a child to have this experience where they're emotionally supported, they're in environments that support their growth, their learning, their depth of processing, their sensing through their senses. And what a gift that would be to a child. So that is something that I care deeply about, and I care deeply about changing specifically in the school system. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic off to Marla. Did you want to share about the dandelion or anything else? I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
Hello, everyone. Well, I am here to support you all here today and to support dear Julie, as well as in the, I said I'd look at the moderation area, the little comments to make sure we aren't missing anything so she can just entirely be present for all of you. And I like being up on stage because then I get to press my little microphone and clap, cheer all times. But I just wanted to go through a couple of the things, the wonderful comments that came up in the feed. I know some people don't want to come up and have a little chit chat, but I wanted to just share a few things. Shannon said that yes, she needs alone time daily and make sure to give that time to recharge herself, and how important that is with HSPs, and that if we do not give ourselves time alone, we can get really, really overwhelmed. And then Taria, I do hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, saying hello. She is an HSP mom to two special HSP children. We definitely need advocates and a safe spaces. So thank you. And I'll be just checking the comments for lovely Julie so she can just be fully present for you.
Thank you, Marla. I really appreciate that. As someone who understands HSPs, it can be very overwhelming trying to navigate all the different parts of Clubhouse while holding space in a room. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing those comments. And thanks for being here. It's always great to see your face. I will circle back here to Joy and let you share what you wanted to talk about creativity.
Thank you. Yes, what you were saying about the sensitivity and being able to really recognize things and then create out of that experience of connection was exactly my journey and my story. I felt like you were describing me. For those who don't know me, my work is in emotions. I'm the author of Emotions and Owner's Manual. I have an online course called Emotions at Work. I've spent the last 40 years of my life delving deep into how to survive. I didn't know it then. It was how to survive as an HSP, and the journey that I went on to really understand myself and understand why I was so miserable and how I could not be miserable and why we as people could be better off. I was seeking truth, and in that journey of seeking truth, I discovered that our emotions, we don't know what the truth is. I mean, there's a certain mystery to being alive, but we can know what the moment to moment truth is of what we feel. And our emotions are bringing us information. And as I tuned into all of that, I was able to really go deep into understanding the different specific emotions of anger and fear and shame and sadness and what they mean and what their energy is and what's happening in our body. And I did study and I went to school and I have a master's and all of this stuff. But it was really the experiencing of it and creating a space where I learned how to create safety for myself. And so I want to encourage people. There's something, for me, it was emotions. It was delving deep into that arena, and it's now my life's work. And I get to meet with people around the world and have impact on people that's very positive and interesting. And a lot of my clients are highly sensitive people, of course. But that's the idea of whatever it is that you have, there's something in you that's of interest or that's pulling you or that draws you, or that whether it's artistic creativity or something in the realm of human experiencing, to really go for that, to trust that, and to know that you have the right and the gift to delve yourself into whatever it is that's drawing you, and because you have something to give to the world through that, and that's where we experience the fulfillment of who we are. So that's the thing I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. And I love that you brought up emotions and how this has been your life's work and not even knowing you're an HSP. I think we are drawn to uh those career paths, or those passions, those interests that support our own experience as an HSP. But because we have struggled or suffered in different ways through those experiences, we want to create that ability for other HSPs to experience our sensitivity at that level where we can use it for good. And one of the points that I wanted to talk about, based on what you shared, was the fifth point on this article. It says ability to make deeper connections with others and themselves. Because HSPs feel things on a deep level, we usually crave meaningful connections. Their high levels of depth, empathy, and emotional intelligence make them excellent partners for those who can relate to and understand their emotional nature. Their profound self awareness, combined with the understanding of what drives others emotionally, helps to create powerful, lasting relationships. And I think about that because humans are emotional. We are experiencing the world through our emotions. A lot of times we think the brain or our thinking thoughts are in control, but ultimately emotions are running the ship. And if we're able to deeply tap into those range of emotions and really understand and identify them in ourself, we will be able to better articulate and communicate those emotions with others. And ultimately, through that conversation, we can connect with other people on a deeper level, but also a more meaningful level because it's emotional. So, if you want to share anything more about emotions and relationships, Joy, I know you're a great resource for that, but I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
Yes, I think that what's important is that we start with ourselves. While we do have that sensitivity to others, and you and I we did a room a few weeks ago on boundaries, which is recorded so people can listen to that. But it's learning how to create energetic boundaries was profound for me, in terms of creating a space in which I could be myself. Now, that was long after I'd already started my emotions work, so that was like a big bonus that added to that. But what starts with the self, with accepting your own emotions, because there's so much judgment about emotions, and there's so much negative labeling that, oh, anger is negative and shame is negative, and and the fact is that the emotions are not negative. It's the mismanagement of them, the suppression and denial, or being overwhelmed by them, that creates a negative results. It's not the emotion itself that is negative. And so to be able to tune into ourselves first and accept, this feeling I have right now, it's telling me something and it's okay. And I can be with it and learn and listen from it, rather than and to let the other people take care of themselves first. Sometimes we could get a little fixated on I would get a little fixated on trying to help other people, and I had to really let them go, especially family members. Just let them live their own lives, because everybody's on their own journey. I was a perfectionist for quite a long time, which is an adaptation, I think, for some HSPs. So that's what I'd like to say, is that honor yourself and treat your own emotions as precious jewels, that are telling you information that you need to know.
I totally agree with you, Joy. And I think, our emotions are always communicating to us. We just don't always give space and time to feel into those emotions, or be with those emotions, or accept those emotions. And, I think a lot of times as deep feelers, highly sensitive people are still developing those skills to manage our emotions. and to give space to them. But I think because of our depth of processing, we're the ones that are going to actually take that on. Because it affects us so deeply, we want to understand that part about ourselves. One of the books I wanted to recommend, and I'm sure maybe some of you have already heard about Brene Brown's book. It's called Atlas of the Heart, and she actually dissects 87 emotions. And usually, when you ask someone what are the range of emotions that you feel in a day, most people will say sad, mad, or happy. We don't really have the language to talk about our emotions. And through that book, she gives us language that helps us see our emotions from a different perspective and also give words to feelings that we may have just clumped into. I feel angry or I feel mad. And through that language, we're a bit better able to communicate with others and put words to those really intense feelings that are going to come up for highly sensitive people. So I just wanted to recommend that book.
And I'm going to just jump in and recommend my own book because it is called Emotions: An Owner's Manual. And I go into depth of sadness, fear, anger, and joy, what emotions are, how you experience them in your body, what the meaning of these emotions are, with exercises of how to process from the past, how to experience in the present, and how to communicate. I'm not as famous as Brene Brown, but it's a really good book.
Well, and what I love about your book, Joy, I have a copy, by the way. Joy sent me a copy. I really appreciate it. Is it is an owner's manual. So it's not just labeling the emotions, but giving you those practical pathways forward on how to own them, how to tap into them, and really, connect with your emotions in a tangible way. So I appreciate your book as well. Um, One of the other things I wanted to mention that was listed in the article is point number 7. It says, we're more conscientious. Highly sensitive people are more likely to be self reflective and think about the consequences of their actions. Due to their empathy and concern for others, they may also have a strong sense of justice and fairness. This can make them more conscientious than the average person. They tend to be more considerate of others and typically strive to do what they think is right in every situation. I'm curious if anyone can relate to that paragraph. It goes on to say, for some HSPs, personal and cultural values are exceptionally important, and their feelings associated with their values are heightened. This makes for a conscientious person. Justice and fairness are often strongly valued by HSPs because they notice and are keenly aware of so much unfairness in the world. So that's heavy. That's something that I, as an HSP, have gone in and out of understanding in myself and feeling that my window of tolerance can sometimes put me in a state of numbing out because there is just so much unfairness in the world, and it's really hard to process everything, to be aware of that, and it's just not possible as an HSP to turn it off. Once you kind of learn about these injustices, it's really hard to not get behind them and see what's possible for us to make changes. So I would love to hear from anyone that feels that a lot of your actions are motivated by seeking justice and fairness in the world, or if that's something totally new to you.
Julie, I just have a little comment that came up in the feed that I'd just like to read to you if you don't
Go ahead.
mind. So this is a really wonderful one from Taria. And again, let me know if I'm mispronouncing that name. It says, what impact would being repeatedly called emotionally abusive due to hypersensitivity have on an HSP? So that's the question. And then lovely Rakumar said, I was acknowledged as weak, serious person because I was expressing my emotions raw and blunt for which they can't handle it. So I think that this is definitely plays on exactly what you're saying. I am Marlon. I am complete.
So I'm curious about the question about emotionally abusive. Is that being emotionally, you're as an HSP, you're being called emotionally abusive, or you're being emotionally abused by others? I guess is my question on that. And maybe Taria will write something in the comments there. I'll just give a little space for that. I saw Jennifer had unmuted, so I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
Yeah, I really relate to feeling it so much that I have very brief seasons of taking on, looking directly at things and taking action, but that's not a strength. I have many other friends who that is their strength, and I would find myself again comparing myself to their what they can do well. And I used to really like get down on myself for that and shut down. Now I am accepting myself, in this moment, like within like the last year even, and I am consciously cutting myself off from a lot of news because I am focusing on myself. And I wonder if after this season, if I will come out of it and be able to handle things. But I'm at the point where I'm just kind of like acting like a guard to what my eyes see and what I'm taking in. Because, like you said, I'll think about it. Like, if I remember I moved into this neighborhood a few years back, and then, the pandemic and the shutdown hit. And so I'd kind of, look out the window and you just kind of pay attention more to what's going around. And if I saw a parent being unfair or verbally abusive or something where it's like, it's not my business, but it would just break my heart. If I saw some political craziness on the news, I would think about it and I would just, and I would ruminate and ruminate and ruminate to the point where it got so unhealthy that, yeah, I'm now at the point where I am just not watching any news. I know that if something really big is happening, it'll come to me, you know, and I'm for the first time not feeling guilty about it because I'm like, I'm taking care of myself. I don't know how long this season will last. Maybe it will be my whole life. And I'm just going to like this, probably not. But yes, I'm not an action taker, but I feel it. Yes, definitely.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate your point about the news. That is definitely something I would not recommend for HSPs to watch. Really, at the root of news is just fear. And, there is news in the world that is happy, that is good, that is changing the world. And that's not what the news focuses on. And so I had actually started watching the news when the pandemic started because, of course, I wanted to be informed and things were happening so quickly and I just wanted to be aware. But I actively stopped watching it last June in 2021. And it was just out of habit that I was watching it every morning and it was devastating. It did not. Hit or land well with me, and I, like you said, I would constantly be thinking about those stories and just feeling really helpless that I'm not able to do anything about these deep feelings. And how can I contribute with these huge global problems? So I definitely have removed the news for my own um care for myself, and I just feel for highly sensitive people it is just not worth watching. And I want to hit on this point here that talks about HSPs have the ability to be peacemakers, so kind of taking that pain of what the world is experiencing and shifting that. So it says, because of their heightened sensitivity, HSPs tend to become anxious around conflict and prefer to avoid it if possible. And there's a quote here: I believe that conflict is challenging for them because anger, shaming, and blaming are harsh emotions that can easily overwhelm someone who already has such a tender system. That's kind of what you said, Jennifer, about being in those situations where you're witnessing something that isn't being directed to you, but as someone who can deeply feel energy around us and have compassion for those situations, it's very brutal to be around as a highly sensitive person. I couldn't agree with you more on that. But it does say, however, their strong empathy can also ensure they are better equipped at seeing the other person's point of view. They are naturally more relationship oriented than agenda oriented, making them great mediators if they choose to be active peacemakers. If there is ever a conflict that can't be settled, an HSP may be able to help establish peace. And I think that's really important in noting, because it is difficult for us to be around conflict and to put ourselves in those situations. And we're not all, as HSPs, going to be able to be an active peacemaker. But I have just taken stock of my past experiences, and I have noted that my ability to be in those situations, I tend to get really grounded within myself and feeling that I need to resource energy that makes me feel more protected. And through that process, I can then be more of a service to the people who are in the conflict. And I don't know if anyone else experiences that, but I tend to respond to intense experiences in a really calming and peaceful way. I noticed this when I was a nanny in New York, and I would be in situations where I had to act fast. I had to be in charge of someone, a little human's safety, and be very protective. But at the same rate, I was able to take my own emotional reactivity in those situations and put it on a shelf, so that I could then serve that person that is going through the conflict or that intense experience. And so I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but that is definitely something I've noticed within myself. It almost seems counterintuitive for HSPs to be able to kind of shelve that experience. But again, I think that gives us the capacity to understand someone else's situation and kind of act in a way that supports that person, protects that person through that conflict or that intense experience. So I just wanted to share that.
Julie, I know I've been commenting a lot. Do you mind if I
Of
say something
course,
on
you're
this one?
welcome to. Yes.
Okay. Like, oh my goodness. So, when you were saying about the peacemaker, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I was just kind of, like you said, taking stock of everything. And but then when you said like a nanny with the children, I was like, oh yes, with my kids, I totally ground. I totally like bear down, ground, shelf my emotions, and then I zoom in and I like am the because I have a 7-year-old boy and an almost 4-year-old girl, and you know they're gonna have their miscommunications or power struggles or whatever it is, and I'll get in there and do negotiate. And I found that interesting because I kind of surprised myself when I went into that, because I was like, whoa, you know, when you're a mom, your brain changes. And so I always like was like, wow, the power of being a mom, you know, like I've never really felt that ability to do that. And it's a very, it feels good, you know, to be able to have almost like a superpower to be able to do that grounding, you know, and to help. And so the but then I'm thinking now, you know what it is? I'm stepping into the protector role rather than feeling like the victim role, because in most other ways in my life, in my past, especially younger past, I wouldn't feel the ability to do that, and I would just want to hide or like, go into some kind of response of protection, but not in a grounded, I'm gonna help way. And this winter, my grandmother passed, and she was the matriarch. Had three daughters. All three just do not get along, and we always said when she goes, it's gonna just the family's just gonna go crazy, gonna go whatever. But then I heard I forget his name. He said something about, if somebody passes, you should try to have it together so that you can console, you can be in charge. I can't remember how he put it, but it really connected to me. And this was when my grandmother's health was declining. And so I decided when she passes, I'm going to step into that role, similar to like what I would do with my kids, but I'm going to, and I did, I grounded like crazy. And I stepped into the role of being, uh, I don't even know what to call it, but like an elder, because my mom and my aunts just aren't there, So I went to that funeral, and I'm very like protective. I'm like still in that phase of like, feel kind of vulnerable. I'm not very like touchy feely unless I'm like really good with you. Even my family, but I was like so grounded. I was like consoling people, touching people, hugging people, and the whole family mourned those services in such a healthy way. And I felt so proud of myself because I was able to be the facilitator of that. So thank you for bringing that point up of Peacemaker, because I powerfully identify it with it in those two things, even though at first thought I wouldn't have thought that. So thank you, Julie.
I'm going to interrupt very briefly. It's Joy, and I have an appointment. I have to go, so I'm so sorry I have to get off the call, but thank you so much. And I hear you, Jennifer. That's beautiful. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks,
Joy.
Joy. See you next time. Thanks for being here. Okay, sorry, I was having a problem unmuting myself. I just wanted to go ahead and say welcome to Emily. I was having a little issue trying to get you to stage, so I'm glad you were able to hop up here. I'll go ahead and pass the mic off to you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Julie, thank you. I was just pleased to see this room about HSPs, and I definitely feel like I am an HSP. I had a lot of like the childhood markers for it too, like really, really overwhelmed by like certain smells or like clothing feelings on me were my two biggest things. Like I absolutely could not stand the feeling of certain types of clothes on my body. I'm still kind of that way. But I'm just curious if like I feel so often that like I'm like very misunderstood, and there's not a lot of like space for people who are sensitive to kind of like reset or like be themselves without, people thinking that there's something like wrong with you. um and I don't know, I'm just curious if other people experience that, or like maybe how you I don't know if this is the appropriate space to even ask these questions, but I don't know, just if anybody has experienced that or tips or um yeah, maybe I'll just put that out and mute myself. So thank you.
I think that's a really great question. And I think that's a very common feeling for highly sensitive people, to feel misunderstood. I think when you look at the way that the trait is made up, Elaine Aron has a great acronym called DOES, DOES. And when you break that down, so D stands for depth of processing, O is overwhelm, E is empathy and emotional reactivity, and S is sensing the subtle. So if you kind of break down those different parts of the way that she describes the trait, we're having an internal experience that non-HSPs could not even relate to. And so we are being, I guess, reactive to that stimuli that is external and internal. And our nervous system is designed to process more information and to hold on to that information and process it longer. So if you think about 80% of the population isn't experiencing the world that way, they just don't get us. They don't understand our experience. And so that's where, as highly sensitive people, it's really important to educate ourselves about this trait, to learn what the brain differences are, to learn what it is required to take care of our sensitive selves, whether that's lifestyle hacks or making sure you get a lot of rest. And then through that process, that journey of being an HSP, I think we can better articulate our needs and our experiences with others. But ultimately, that misunderstanding or feeling that people don't understand us is a clue that we need to really do that self-love work where we fully accept ourselves and we fully embrace our trait. And through that kind of self-compassion, um, it doesn't really matter if people misunderstand us because we're all experiencing this world from a different experience, a different perspective. And there are going to be so many people that can't relate or connect to our personal experience. And so the more that we can embrace who we are as sensitive individuals and those beautiful superpowers that come with being a highly sensitive person, a lot of that need to feel that others need to understand us kind of falls to the wayside. So I know, just a personal experience, the minute I learned about this trait, the one thing I wanted to do was share it with my parents. My parents could be highly sensitive people, but the way that they were raised, they've either suppressed it or masked it or really haven't been a witness to that part of themselves. Um, and I made them take the self test and I let them know that this was, a trait based on science and these are the differences and this is who I am. And my whole life I've been the black sheep of my family. I feel like I don't belong. I didn't connect with my family in a way that felt true and authentic. And so I thought, oh, once I learned about this trait, my parents will finally understand me and give me the love that I have always been craving and needing. And what happened was, they had some understanding of the trait. They recognized that this is something that was really life changing for me, but they aren't as invested in learning about me as I would want them to. And unfortunately, again, um, we all have parents that have may be supportive or may not have been supportive in our upbringing. And I don't blame them. I'm not upset with them. They were only doing what they had learned from their parents. And I think about all the generational trauma that is passed down, and also the day and age where my parents were raised and how the world was at that time, and just how we're only currently talking about mental emotional health and normalizing that conversation. It's just, I feel like my parents' generation did not have the tools or the awareness to be fully emotionally raw, to tap into that part of their sensing and feeling and emotional parts. And so that's kind of just a reframe for myself, that on my HSP journey, it's not as important for people to understand me as much as it is to accept myself as a highly sensitive person and really embrace that I need to create a lifestyle that supports my nervous system. And that might upset people, that might make people confused about me or have a misinterpretation of who I am based on my values, my boundaries, and how I set my life up. But again, that's their witness to my life versus my own personal witness to who I am and what's important to me as a highly sensitive person. So I just wanted to put that out there. Let me know if that resonates with you.
Yes, that very much resonates with me, and I think it's just like I feel like I keep coming back to this. I'm in my mid 30s, so um, but I feel like a lot of times if I'm not careful, I feel kind of like I feel like the people around me are always encouraging me to have like more capacity or like telling me that I'm somehow, like, oh, you shouldn't sleep so much or all these things that sometimes start to feel like a little bit like gaslighting if I listen to it too much. And it just like, I sometimes start to get kind of resentful and frustrated because it feels like everybody's always telling me like the ways that I'm trying to take care of myself are like wrong or invalid, or it's because I'm depressed or because I have like some issues. And I just feel like, you know, it's like kind of hard or annoying to have to constantly like remind people or tell people like I'm giving myself what I need, or like for people not to trust that you're doing what you need to do. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like even my partner sometimes misunderstands me and um, like it's hard to express like, hey, my nervous system needs a break, or like if we have some kind of conversation that feels intense, it's like my heart will race, or like, and I know that's not like just an HSP thing, but to the point where just like I have to reset my nervous system. And I do avoid those kinds of conversations if I can, because like it takes it out of me sometimes for a day or so. So I don't know, I just yeah, it's just nice to hear other people's um experience with this, and I think it's a nice reminder to just be able to more deeply figure out what works for me and just like let people have their feelings about it. But I think hearing this also is helping me remember that like there's not something wrong with me, it's just like a difference. And I think it's too easy to slip down into a path of thinking like instead of working on supporting yourself, like picking yourself apart or thinking like what's wrong with me, because everybody is kind of telling you like, oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And so yeah, I think it's pretty validating. So thank you.
Yes, and exactly what you described, Emily, is why it's so important to engage with HSP community and surround yourself with other HSPs who get it and who see you for who you are, because our society and our culture does not support us. And if you have to think about it, our culture and society supports the 80% of the population who is not sensitive. And so we are going to get that messaging. We are going to be reminded that we need to behave differently, that we have to take care of ourselves differently than the majority. And so when you're the minority, you often internalize that as, well, there must be something wrong with me. And so that is a very common feeling. And that is what I stand against, is there is nothing wrong with us. When you learn about being a highly sensitive person, you learn that this is an innate biological trait. This is something you're born with. It isn't something that you need to change or fix. It's nothing to diagnose. It's nothing that you triggered by trauma, although we are impacted by trauma differently, big T and little t. And so I think kind of going into those conversations with that armor, having those conversations with the people that love you, who do want to give the space to understand you deeper, those are the things that you need to remind them that we have different brain differences. This is something we're born with. There's nothing for me to fix or change about this trait. It's really understanding the depths of this trait that is going to allow me to be my best self. And when you can share that with someone else, they may start to develop more acceptance and the ability to give you the space to kind of share your experience and in whatever capacity that is for you. So, yes, is it annoying that people continually want to project what they think we should be doing? Totally. I agree with that 100%. But ultimately, for the people who have the capacity to listen and listen deeply to our experience, give those people the opportunity to understand some of the nuts and bolts of this trait so that they can understand that we're born this way and there's nothing wrong with us. I think that's just something really important to embrace as a highly sensitive person within yourself. But then when you embrace it, you're energetically connected to being that advocate for yourself, for having stronger boundaries, and for giving your time and energy to the people who are open to listening to your experience. So all of that is really important, I think, on our HSP journey. Does that make sense to you, or is there anything you would like to add?
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that it's just I'm glad I found this room today and like kind of reminded myself of this because and what you're saying just really resonates because I think like if you don't I think lately I've been feeling like I've kind of lost that knowing about myself just because I feel like my partner and my brother have been really on me about like, you know, certain certain things and saying like I should, I have ADHD or maybe I'm like traumatized and all these things and it's like, you know, like I try and listen to people's opinion. I get that that's valuable sometimes if someone is kind of seeing something in you that maybe you can't see, but it wasn't feeling like it was sitting right with me. And then, I feel like just remembering that I I need certain things in order to function well is just like important. And yeah, I'm sure that if I'm not giving myself those things, like I'm sure that I seem to others like I'm not functioning well because I'm not. So, um, yeah, I think it's just good and I think my partner is kind of sensitive in his own ways, but like he does I think even he doesn't understand sometimes like yesterday morning I woke up, he wasn't even in the house, but I like somehow knew that something was wrong, like something that he wasn't feeling like emotionally well or something just by whatever you know energy he left in the apartment. And he was like, how could you have known something like that? um so uh yeah, I guess it's just a really good reminder to you know stay centered in myself. So thank you.
Hello, Miss Julie. I just have two little quick things here for you. First, if you do have space for one more speaker up on the stage before you wrap this up, in the comments, Raj Kumar asked if he could come up on stage. And the second thing, it was something that Emily just brought up when some people are telling you you shouldn't, and they're giving you that advice, and we all feel this, and this is something I go through with my clients, is if anyone uses that term with you shouldn't or you should, they're trying to express to you what rules they've made up for themselves. And if they get to the point where they say you shouldn't, you should with something, those are rules that they have questions about in themselves, and they're trying to convince their circle right around them that maybe if everyone else abides to this, maybe this is right. So they're trying to communicate what is inside of them that somewhere deep down they don't fully believe, they don't fully ascribe to, and they're trying to convince themselves. So I should or I shouldn't is never actually for you. It is always for themselves. They're trying to voice something to you. So that is it. I am complete, and I do apologize, but I have to head out. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation next week. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Marla. Thanks for managing the chat and helping me out with that. I really appreciate it. Really quick before we talk to Raj Kumar, I just wanted to say, Emily, one of the things that has been helpful for me is sharing Elaine Aron's self test with my non HSP family members or partner, and having them take the test. Because just having that self awareness of, where do they fall on that scale? And how can they then see that questionnaire be a part of your experience? And so we can start to create that shift for other people. Again, those who are willing, who are open minded, and who love us and want to see us happy, healthy, and thriving. So, self test on Elaine Aron's website, and also the Highly Sensitive Person book. Again, it's kind of the owner's manual of being an HSP. And you can find different facts and quotes and stuff from that book to kind of remind yourself of who you are and what makes you a highly sensitive person. And then you can kind of share that foundational education with others in a really empowering way. So I just wanted to offer that to you as well. So thank you so much for bringing your questions. They're completely valid. It's no coincidence that you found this room today. Maybe this conversation allows you to feel more empowered when you're putting those boundaries in place and helping other people understand what your experience is as a highly sensitive person. So thank you so much for sharing yourself and your questions. I really appreciate it. And with the remaining time here, we have just about 10 minutes. So I will go ahead and pass the mic off to Raj Kumar. What would you like to contribute to the conversation here?
Hello, Julie. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with. And I really want to acknowledge Marla's effort to raise her. Okay, she has gone out, and it's okay to acknowledge that she spoke on behalf of myself and the others to give or at least make ourselves seen. So, this is the word which I like to start with. The word seen. As an highly sensitive person, for most of the time, I wasn't seen at all. So this is where I have been asking myself why I am not even able to resonate or get along with different set of people. It's been years where I never knew that I was suffer. I wasn't not suffering. I am an higher HSP, and I recently came to an understanding that non-HSP persons cannot understand myself. Even HSP as well, they cannot, because my sensitivity is entirely different from the others. So right now, I can validly vouch that every HSP is entirely different. So there is no common groundwork at all, and that is where I started to work on considering my cultural, ethnic, linguistic differences, where most of the times I often felt isolated, lonely, detached, or sometimes even lost, just because I couldn't see or even heard about. I just want to ask one question: that we, as an empath, as a being, we often connect with everything, but we don't even speak about our own pain. At least in my case, that I never had any people who made me to sit back or walk and talk what I'm going through. So I was considerate enough to understand what they are going through, but the opposite wasn't happening. So that is where I started to work on what is making me or creating the imbalance in such a way that I was often called a serious, intimidating, highly impulsive person, because my body's imbalance cannot be even per- resonated or even understood. So basically, this condition was entirely developed. I wasn't born with. And due to the fact that I was raised entirely overprotective and I never had that ability to make my own decisions, so I have been held captive, at least in the sense where watching TV was my own entire medium. So basically, I had solid instinct that uh, the information which I gained through the eyes alone, that that itself was so raw that created an entire imbalance in my system. I used to watch a lot of things. I used to sit back and understand. I'm a deep thinker, and I can understand a person within seconds, because in such a way that those raw information gave me a lot of things to think about. So basically, I would avoid such people, and uh, since I am more super aware, that is became a problematic for me, because I can find my right people. But the point, when the time passed on, uh, it was challenging. So I often felt entire time in solitude. That was my only cope up mechanism. But right now I started to understand this behavior. It is not an issue, it is not a disease, it is not a condition at all. Just because the information is not processed in an effective manner, not in a proper way, in an effective manner, I'm still kept on projecting the emotional storms which is happening inside. So I need to know entire weather check inside me, as if what is triggering me. So basically, emotional intelligence was zero. Stability, I can't even speak about. The word stable itself is a luxury which I can't even afford. So that is where I came up with another word called being civilized. If I'm a civilized person, means then I could make myself fluidic, seamless in all aspects. That is I'm working towards. The reason why I'm saying this, because if we consider the raw constructs which keeps on propelling these emotions within ourselves, right? And if we try to understand, or if we try to make a compiled intellect out of it, the emotions won't even arise. There could be a trauma, that could be a fears, desires, or even your dark things which you can't even speak about, and it is your choice. So having the right set of choices is where I was able to make a difference. So I consider my entire conditioning, my surroundings, and where I came from, and to which what I'm going to become. The problem is I was not ready to accept the life as it came to me, because it was unfair, and it's hard to digest because it was so raw. Basically, our senses are highly overreactive. My skin is entirely overreactive, where I used to be more vigilante, and I used to uh, observe and assess the situation. But what really happened is that people often see me as a stalker, because I kept on looking like a watchdog. That wasn't my entire theme at all. I was trying to make myself defensive and aware. So I realized that whatever mechanisms which I was using, that started to backfire on me. So on a just note, you should understand the pain you go through. Then you have to see it first. When you see it, you can easily start to realize, actualize in different aspect. So since I was entirely full with noise, I couldn't see it proper way. So I don't want to prolong anymore, since the room is about to end. So I want to give a short note that I need to see right things. I need to see effective manner. If I combine all these things, then we could make a lot of difference. And with that, I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj Kumar. And you bring up a lot of different points in this article as you share. And one of the things that I wanted to share here before we close out the room is that deep sense of knowing. And this was brought up by, I forget her name. Was it Emily? She was just in here and she was speaking about her experience of kind of knowing there was something going on with her partner and he didn't really understand how she knew, and that ability to tap into our intuition. That is one of the points on this article as well. And it says highly sensitive people can be incredibly intuitive. They tend to be more connected with both the personal and collective unconsciousness, giving them access to information that doesn't come through logic and reason. They are more in tune with their own nature as well as the subtle cues from their surroundings. They can easily sense what is going on beneath the surface and may have a strong knowledge about something without realizing how they received the insight. So, kind of like what you were sharing, Raj Kumar, we're having this deep experience and others aren't a witness to that because it's something internal, it's inside of us. And we are able to tap into that collective unconsciousness where so many people are asleep at the wheel. They're not tapped into it. And our sensitivity gives us that gift of being energetically connected, emotionally connected, and then transpires into this deep knowing. Whether we understand where that information came from or not, that deep knowing is such a superpower. And it's a guiding light for not only us, but other people around us. So it's a way to make a contribution. It's a way to uncover some of that shadow that other people may have around their perspective, experiences, and viewpoints. So again, the more that we know about ourselves, the more that we ground in our knowledge and awareness of what it takes to be a highly sensitive person is so important. And then through that process, we're able to show up differently. We're able to not be as triggered. We're able to take in information and kind of put all of those data points together and share ourselves from an authentic place with kindness and compassion. I think that is a skill and a gift of a highly sensitive person. So even though, again, we brought up a lot of conversation around feeling misunderstood and feeling frustrated and going through those struggles of being the minority for, the population, we're 20% of the population. So one of those first statements that I want to recognize is don't expect the 80% to understand our experience. And when you can kind of put that in your head, instead of getting angry or frustrated with the 80%, we can start to give them an experience or share that internal experience with them that gives them the gift of understanding us on a deeper level. So, again, this is such a small amount of time to go over these like big, heavy topics, but I think they're so valid and so important to kind of bring up. And to, again, I want to hit on the fact that you're here in the HSP community. You're here with fellow HSPs that see you, understand you, and being around those like minds are so important for our health and emotional well-being. And the more that you can step into these spaces, the stronger you'll feel as a highly sensitive person. And Elaine Aron even says it in her 5 necessities. It's one of those 5 things that we need to survive and thrive as highly sensitive people. So if you feel like you're on that journey and you're really stuck with the struggles, the misunderstanding, the friction that can happen between HSPs and non-HSPs, keep coming to these rooms, keep educating yourself, and keep giving yourself what you need. Develop that self-compassion and stop comparing yourself to the 80% of the population that's going to function and behave differently in the world than we do. So I just want to give you that pep talk here before we take off. But thanks again for being here, everyone. I really appreciate your contribution, your perspective, your stories, your questions. It's all relevant and important to share. So thanks again for being here. And we won't have a Thursday conversation next week. I will be busy subbing, but look for the future schedule that's happening in May. But tomorrow I'm going to have a special room for Earth Day, where we're going to talk about climate grief and what that means and how highly sensitive people are experiencing climate change and what that means for us, and then how to take care of ourselves so that we aren't as impacted and, like listening to the news, be devastated by what's happening in the world. So if you're interested in that topic, please join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central. And like I said, I will be getting more events on the May schedule. So come to the HSP Club, follow us, follow me, or anyone that resonates with you. But we will continue to have conversations that educate, advocate for highly sensitive people, and just build community and connection with our fellow HSPs. It's so important. So thanks again for being here. Have a great day. Enjoy the weekend, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for hosting such wonderful and genuine conversations. It means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enjoy. See you next time.